Dear friends, my name is Naushi Nizami and I'm back with you to explain and discuss three more criterions of welfare economics. The fourth criterion of welfare economics is given by Nicholas Calder and John Hicks, and in short, it is known as compensation criterion. Supposingly, there is a change that may be possible which may benefit some people and may also hurt some people. So let's assume a change in the economy which will benefit some section of the society and it's going to hurt the other section of the society. Let's then conduct a study on how much are the people who are gaining willing to pay and how much are the people who are losing or getting hurt willing to pay to avoid it. So basically this study is going to check the compensation which the people who are going to lose are willing to pay in order to avoid that experience or policy, and the compensation which gaining people, the people who are benefiting from such move, are willing to pay in order to have that change. If the former is greater than the latter, that means if the amount which the gainers are willing to pay is greater than the amount which people who are hurt and who are losing are willing to pay to avoid it, then there is an improvement in social welfare. So the criteria is very simple. The improvement in social welfare occurs if those who benefit from a change can compensate those who are hurt and still be left with some net gain. However, here the criticism is that it ignores the current income distribution and it only exercises majority rule. So it is not possible that always when you go with a majority rule where more people are willing to support an initiative or a policy action, that it implies that the policy action is actually good for everyone. One also needs to evaluate the intricacies of that policy move. Similarly, it's not possible that the current income distributions may be in a manner that some people may be willing to pay to avoid, or some people may be willing to pay to give in order to gain. It is possible that there may be a community who is getting hurt, who may be losing in the process but doesn't have enough money to pay for it. Otherwise, they could have paid more than what the gainers were willing to pay. So the realities of everyone differs. The realities of gainers may differ, the financial capacities of people who are losing may differ, and so it is not fair to consider that whoever is paying more and is able to compensate the people who are losing actually is supporting a good policy action. So this was known as the Calder-Hicks compensation criterion. Let's move to the Pareto optimality criterion. This criterion is given by the famous Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto, and the criterion says that any chain that makes at least one individual better off and no one worse off is an improvement in social welfare. And a situation in which it is impossible to make anyone better off without making someone worse off is known as Pareto efficiency. So the difference between these two lines is that the previous line says that if we are able to improve the situation of at least one person and we do not deteriorate the situation of anyone else in doing so, then it is an improvement in social welfare. However, if we are able to improve situation of someone at the cost of deteriorating the situation of someone else, then it means that resources were already efficiently allocated and so no further change should be undertaken. So Pareto efficiency occurs when there is efficiency of production. So when there is a case of two firms who are producing two goods using two factors of production, capital and labor, one may be able to reach the state of Pareto efficiency if one is able to construct a contract curve inside the Edgeworth box which is representing the exchange process between the two firms. Similarly, efficiency of consumption also can indicate Pareto efficiency, and third, Pareto efficiency is also possible in product mix. Now friends, let us discuss the real world scenarios and whether Pareto efficiency actually occurs in reality. So in reality, you need to think about the various government policies which have taken place in the near history, whether by doing so Pareto efficiency occurred or it did not occur. So supposingly, let's take the example of a policy move which is aiming to reduce the income tax rate for the lower income group, or the move is aiming to increase the tax base, and the same move is also increasing the tax rate for the upper income group. So if the tax slabs are such that a person who is having an annual income of up to rupees 3 lakh per annum does not have to pay tax, the people who are having annual income between 3 lakh to say 5 lakh have to pay very less tax, but the people who are having annual income above 30 lakh rupees, they have to pay more tax as compared to the previous year. This implies that welfare of the lower income groups is being improved at the cost of the welfare of the upper income groups, and this basically doesn't indicate an efficient government policy. Now you can also think of situations where governments have tried to bring about a social change. You have to think that whether those social changes happened without worsening of some other section of the society. For example, if a dam has to be constructed, or if say an automobile plant has been purchased on a farm land, how much how much is the gain of that move, and how much is the loss of that move? We can also think of the various controversies that generated when the bullet train project was initiated, and the geographical map of the train route was released, and it showed that how many forests were going to get cut because of it, and the resulting controversies. So historically, if you look back at the government policies which have been initiated, it's difficult to find policies which have not created any cost to anyone else, and only the policies which have improved the situation of everyone and did not deteriorate the situation of anyone else, only those policies we can consider as the ones which might have improved social welfare. So improvement in social welfare and the policies which result into such improvements are difficult to find, but that doesn't mean that they do not exist. So if supposingly there is a tax cut for all the income groups, and this tax cut is not being financed by any other alternative, so basically the tax cut has been given to individuals in a situation when there is no fiscal deficit, or the fiscal deficit is within the limits. That means the burden of the deficit will not get passed on through public debt or through any other manner. Then you can say that this kind of reduction in tax rates for all the income groups may be leading to improvement in social welfare. Similarly, if there are subsidies given, if the subsidies are given say for education or for health facilities, one has to immediately look that from where the subsidies are being generated. So what is the source of revenue for those subsidies? If that source of revenue is increasing additional cost for some other section of the society, then it may not reflect an overall improvement in the social welfare of the country. So the real world scenarios are difficult to analyze because at times this complete information may not be available in public domain, but if it is available, then one should always check and analyze whether a particular government policy move is Pareto efficient, or it is leading to improvement in social welfare, or it is not Pareto efficient. So this is the fifth criterion of social welfare. Let's move to the sixth and the final criterion, which is known as Bergson criterion. So Bergson suggested the use of an explicit set of value judgments which he gave in the form of a social welfare function. A social welfare function is to be taken similar to what you call as individual utility function. The only difference between social welfare function and individual utility function is that individual utility function shows or reflects utility of only one individual, but when we plot social utility functions, they are reflecting the picture of the entire society. Now, this Bergson criterion makes use of social indifference curves, which are basically locus of combination of utilities of, say, two individuals A and B, which yield same level of social welfare. And just like there is a property of indifference curve, same goes for social indifference curve. Higher social indifference curve represent higher social welfare. The criticism is that visually this looks a very good way of comparing the well-being and welfare of society, but quantitatively there is no defined method through which you can actually calculate the individual utilities and calculate the social utility function. This diagram shows a typical social indifference curve. You can see that utility of individual A is plotted on x-axis and utility of individual B is plotted on y-axis, and W1 and W2 are showing the social welfare curves, or what you call social indifference curves. W2 is above W1, which means social welfare is higher and W2 as compared to W1. So this is how Bergson criterion has been used, and it's a graphical manner of evaluating the social change in the society. So friends, we come towards the end of this session where we have discussed all the criterions of welfare economics. We will discuss some more concepts relating to this topic in our next session. Till then, all of you take care and have a great time ahead. Thank you.